Dear friends, grace, mercy, and peace be with you from the one who is, who was, and who is to come, Jesus the Christ. Amen. What was Mary thinking? Anybody who dreams regularly would tell her that when you hear in your dream that you are pregnant by any other way than the natural way, you wake up and with great relief you remind yourself that it's only a dream. But by the time she gets to the home of Elizabeth, the baby is kicking. And she needs some support from her wise, supportive cousin, who just happens to be dealing with a miraculous conception of her own. To this point, there is no blessing. There is fear and panic and confusion, but there is no blessing. At least, there shouldn't be. You see, there was nothing blessed in the first century about a pregnancy happening outside of marriage. At the very least, Mary's pregnancy would have brought irreparable shame to her and Joseph's families. At worst, it would have led to her death. And yet the first thing out of Elizabeth's mouth upon seeing Mary is, "Blessed are you among women." It's like the child who goes first to her grandmother with frightening news because she is more likely or less likely to be judged by a grandparent than by a parent. I had the good fortune of having parents who loved me but also disciplined me. I had grandparents that could have cared less about the discipline part. All I got was grace and my first beer, and among other things. Maybe that's how it was for Mary with Elizabeth. She trusted that Elizabeth would love her through this frightening ordeal of this unplanned pregnancy, no matter what. No matter what. She may not have expected to hear that she is blessed, but it works because Mary herself rattles off one of the most well-loved testimonies of all time, the Magnificat, about God's intention, not only for Mary, but for all of creation. In a world in which blessing can mean anything from being well off to loving and being loved within one's family, blessing here means being incorporated into God's purpose of turning the world upside down. Blessing here means being incorporated into God's purpose of turning the world upside down. Mary is blessed because she is being welcomed, vulnerabilities and all, into God's transformative action. There's another side to this story, and it has to do with how we hear these words. After years and years of hearing the Magnificat, and in light of current circumstances, we are tempted to doubt these words. Mary may have been courageous for such a young woman or girl in such a vulnerable situation, but she is surely naive if she thinks that the proud will be scattered, that the rich will be sent away empty, and that the powerful will be brought down from their thrones. She says that these things have already taken place, and yet we're still waiting. We have a choice. We can pat Mary on the head and say, "Nice try," with these beautiful and powerful words, and thank you for giving birth to Jesus, by the way, but you seem to get a little bit carried away with all the things that God has done and will do. Or we can say, in defiance of so many things that we see, in spite of so many feelings that put us on the edge of despair, you, Mary, you, of all people, are right. This is what God will do, and we will not give up. I read recently where a fellow preacher had suggested that we cut the sermon short today and simply sing songs of resistance and defiance, because this is what Mary gives us today. What do you think about that, Dietrich, maybe next year? You see, first century Jews believed that the only way they'd be liberated from the Roman occupation would be through God's intervention. This would certainly have been the case in Galilee, where a massacre took place in the town of Sepphoris, killing nearly everyone in the town, which was just 4 miles from Nazareth, in 4 BCE, just about the time of Jesus' birth. They knew how vulnerable they were under Roman imperialism. The incarnation, God made flesh in Jesus. The incarnation was nothing less than a sign of God's intervention, of God's commitment to God's people. And that's how Mary came to see it. And before she gave birth to the promise, she spoke the promise out of her vulnerability. Dietrich Bonhoeffer writes about Mary's song, "It's at once the most passionate, the wildest, one might even say the most revolutionary Advent hymn ever sung. This is not the gentle, tender, dreamy Mary, whom we sometimes see in paintings. This song has none of the sweet, nostalgic, or even playful tones of some of our Christmas carols. It is instead a hard, strong, inexorable song about the power of God and the powerlessness of humankind." During the British colonial occupation of India, the Magnificat was prohibited from being sung in churches. Think about that. Also, during the Dirty War in Argentina in the 70s and 80s of the last century, the mothers of the disappeared children put up posters in the National Plaza with the words of the Magnificat printed on them. From then on, the military junta banned the Magnificat from public display. Words of defiance and hope are a threat to the powerful. Mary speaks from the heart, or from the womb perhaps, about a world that God turns upside down. If people of faith actually listen to her words as a faithful witness of God's truth, they would never support authoritarian leaders or regimes. They would never stand silent as children are separated from their parents or die in custody. They would never vote for legislators who would set aside the well-being of the masses in order to preserve the accumulated riches of a small minority. No, if people of faith actually believed Mary, they would stand eye to eye with the proud, the powerful, and the rich. And with unwavering Mary-like clarity, they would say, "Enough." Did you know that there is only one Magnificat high school in the United States? You're probably thinking either he's quirkier than we thought, or he has way too much time on his hands. Magnificat High in Ohio is not surprisingly an all-girls school. This is what you'll find on the homepage of their website. At Magnificat High School, we believe in the power of women. We value their dreams, their drive, their ideas, and their potential. Our young women graduate from Magnificat empowered to learn, to lead, and to serve in the spirit of Mary's Magnificat. How's that? So maybe we take courage in order to employ some Magnificat logic in our lives today. If God lifts up the lowly Mary, at least lowly in terms of how she would have been understood in the first century, if God lifts up Mary, then God will lift up the lowly everywhere. It will take some time, but it's going to happen. We may not see it, but it's there. And we commit our lives, our faith. We commit our lives and our faith to watching and participating in what God is doing. If God brings Mary into what God is doing in the world, God brings us as well. It's just that simple and just that hard. Amen.